Elizabeth Elliott, and I am the Executive Director and Curator at Alabama Contemporary Art Center, and we are so excited to be partnering with Troy University and the Department of Art and Design for this exhibition, Transience, Trace and Erasure in Lost Landscapes. I had to cheat. And this has been the culmination of years of work and a project concept that started in 2022. And so I'm here with the artists, and I'll let them introduce themselves. And then we're just going to have a conversation, if that's okay with you guys. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Winter Rusiloski, and yeah, I'm a painter, artist with my husband here.
Educator,
mother, yeah. I'm a professor at Baylor University painting, and originally from Pennsylvania, but have been in Texas for the last more than 20 years.
I'm Angel Fernandez, educator, artist as well. Originally from Mexico, husband, father, and we're thrilled to be here and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Visually and orally as well. So.
Yeah. Well, I like that you guys mentioned where you're originally from, because that sort of is the grounding note of this exhibition. And so we started in 2022 with a project concept that you guys wrote to Alabama Contemporary, and over the years, things have evolved and changed, and part of what we do as part of our practice is originating new bodies of work and new concepts from artists. And what was exciting about this concept from the proposal that we've gotten to see sort of grow into fruition was this idea about talking about place and rootedness. And since the dawn of time, philosophers have argued about the relationship between place and identity, and the way that we sort of position our identity to place in various different ways. You know, in a lot of ways, the American dream is grounded in this idea of, like, you buy a house in the suburbs, and the aspirational rootedness and sort of identity as this fixed position. And there's a lot in that we take for granted. And I think I'm going to drop a heavy reference for everybody, but like Edward Glissant is a philosopher who argued that identity is actually built through transience and through relationships, that when we move through the landscape, we meet new people, and that changes who we are. And that identity is a push and pull between these things. And, you know, as somebody from Mexico and then from Pennsylvania, and with a practice that's rooted in the western Texas border landscape, which is a very loaded landscape by itself, and then have taken those practices and put them in Troy, Alabama, there is so much sort of macro and micro that we can think about and talk about as far as how borders are defined, who defines them between states and countries, but also, you know, what we take for granted in sort of land ownership and local communities that have blight and sort of holes in their local landscape. So maybe let's start with that big, heavy question of, like, where are you rooted in your practice, and how has that evolved over the course of your practice?
I guess I'll try to go first. I think for me, you know, Texas was a giant shift, you know, coming from Pennsylvania and the northeastern part of Pennsylvania near, you know, New York. It was the Poconos region, and I had always felt a bit, as beautiful as it was, like a bit trapped by the mountains. Like, I lived in a really little rural town, and I remember I would look out my window and that I wanted to, like, see farther. Or is it further? We always have a discussion about farther. Okay. And so when I got to Texas, which was just, you know, just how it worked out. That's where I ended up going to TCU, and I had a full scholarship, so it was definitely the best bet. I'm really thankful to have gotten gotten to go there and be with Jim Woodson. And another weird thing of just my past that I have to mention is that when I was in Pennsylvania studying, I had 2 Texas art professors that were in Pennsylvania. So it was really kind of funny that I had, and George Sorrells was one of the professors there that was so important to me. And I ended up in Texas, and I'd heard about Texas, and for a long time, I mean, up until when we really started out with this work in the land in the Big Bend region, which we'll talk about, I mean, I felt a bit like, do I even have a right to make work about Texas and about this place, because I wasn't a native Texan, and of course all of the different connotations, you know, of that area. So I felt like, although we started making work in, you know, as early as 2017 and 18 out there was a lot of time it took for us to really get to know people and understand that community there and understand the land. And I think we really put a lot of effort and time, and we're out there almost getting ready to feel like we have a right to even speak about that. So I think that connects with some of what we're talking about here.
So I was born in Mexico and grew up on the other side of the border, and we always refer to the U.S. as the other side, like on the other side. When you move towards the U.S., you move towards the frontier, la frontera. And so I grew up in a place called Delicias, Chihuahua, which was, when I was about 5, that place was about 50 years old. So it was, you know, by most standards, it was a pretty new place. And it was a farming, started off as a village, town, became a larger city. Now it's one of the largest cities in the state of Chihuahua. But it's in the desert, which obviously is going to bring us, you know, back around to where we're working now in the Texas desert. And so I had looked at, you know, it wasn't the exact mountains, but I had looked at this landscape where we're working now, but again, from the other side, from the Mexican side. And so there's, you know, issues of immigration, of movement. I mean, my family immigrated to this northern region of Mexico from farther south. I'm half Spanish, so someone, you know, somewhat down the line moved from Spain to a southern region of Mexico and then moved to the northern region of Mexico, like, you know, almost but not quite to that frontier, to that other side. I was about 10 when we moved to Texas, and I'm neither Mexican or American. I'm Texan, and I know it's weird. I know, like, Texas is this. Holly, you've been in Texas. It's a weird place, and it is, you know, the mythology of this place, right? And I always, you know, I keep joking with everyone here. I'm like, yeah, you know, everything's bigger in Texas, and everything is bigger in Texas. Mm-hmm. Egos are bigger in Texas. Restaurants are bigger in Texas. Cars,
gas
trucks,
stations,
belt buckles. Yeah, I don't have the big belt buckle, right? But anyhow, but then I went to Massachusetts for grad school. So I did undergrad in Texas, in Fort Worth, went to Massachusetts for grad school, and was one of very few Mexican, like, surprisingly, where I was, UMass Dartmouth, not Ivy League Dartmouth. We were in the armpit of the Cape. Anyway, and so, yeah, it was a totally different place. And there's my work deals with identity. You know, we talk about place and identity, and we even curated a show, right? Place and identity at our studio years ago, 2016 maybe. So it's something that I think we both grapple with, you know, constantly. And it's like, okay, well, it's like, you live in Texas now. We both live in Texas. We're Texans, but you're from Pennsylvania. I'm from Mexico, but it's like, you know, where do we belong? And it's, I know we're not unique to this. I mean, artists like the South Korean Do Ho-sa that deals with issues of identity, Young-soon Min, another South Korean artist. And so we certainly are not like pioneers in this idea, but it's something that I mean, even Michelangelo, right, had this great quote that was, you know, totally like watered down, but my work is my identity. You know, how do we separate those two. And certainly place is a huge, 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 huge component of that identity.
Yeah. So you guys bring different kinds of practices and different kinds of legacy of practice into your work. One of the things that I think is really strong about this show is the way that those different methodologies fold into each other. But maybe talk about, because your Winter's background is in painting, landscape painting, and there is a long, heavy tradition of that does and doesn't correlate. There's a point of departure that you've made from that sort of historical legacy of landscape painting. And with you, Angel, what started maybe with sculpture, has sort of necessitated a branching out into performance and other ways of sort of dealing with objects and engaging with them. And so from the legacy of sculpture, you are not casting bronze busts. And
I have, but not anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe talk about the trajectory of your material practice a little bit, and also why you chose to sort of show together and what relationships you're looking for in your various material relationships.
Backtracking, even as a child, I was painting, and I often reference my great Aunt Thelma, who was teaching me to paint when I was a little kid, and she was very much a regional landscape painter. So from before I was even a teenager, I was painting regional landscapes from Pennsylvania and landmark areas. And I also was studying dance all up until I was 18, and then in fact chose a school, Kutztown University of Pennsylvania, where I got my BFA, and I majored in dance. It was a related arts concentration with a dance major, but then one pass of the painting studio and smelling it made me, to everyone's concern, add a second major in studio art painting. So I've always felt like there was a connection in terms of movement. Right away. I was pretty quick in undergrad to jump into abstraction, and I think some of it had been years of already studying the landscape and looking at, of course, I love the Impressionists and Monet, and very aware of the Hudson River School painters, but the idea of mark making and the physicality of the paint, and then gesture. I always preferred a larger painting, and I think it was because I liked to really move around in it. And even at that time, I was trying to experiment with kind of choreographing dance and painting simultaneously. So that, and then around that same time, because I was making really practical decisions, I was also a whitewater rafting guide. That was my backup plan. Should I not get into graduate school, I would just go simply live on the river. But I think all those things really related, because I think I was also always sort of restless and wanting to journey and travel and move, and I didn't want it to be easy. I didn't want to, as beautiful as a lake is, to go sit and look at the lake. I didn't want that. So anyhow, I think, and you can jump in here, Angel, but Angel had an early kind of performative interest too. So it's just been interesting that, for me, I feel like I was then on this path for 20 years plus to integrate mark making and movement and abstraction with landscape. And try to get that balance going, but still yet thinking about movement, journey, memory, physicality of paint, and gesture, which then I think really connects with things you were thinking about early on as well.
Yeah, and I guess, going even farther back, in Mexico I was always around objects and object making. My uncle, who was sort of a unofficially adoptive father to me, was a self-taught engineer. He went to I don't know, I think he like dropped out of school in like the 3rd grade or 4th grade so that he could work and help support, you know, his family, siblings, etc. And so that, to me, that was my trajectory. I was going to work for my uncle. At one point in time, I was going to be, you know, the plan was that I would be a welder because that's what he did. And so I was around welding a lot, and I still remember like the smell, right, of welding and grinding, and the smell of metal, and that dirty, like beautiful smell. And so anyhow, you know, get to the States, go through the different, you know, middle school, elementary school, middle school, high school, and I get to undergrad, and I was gonna be a painter. Like that was my thing. Is like, you know, I'm gonna be painting and drawing because that's what artists are. And I took my first sculpture class, and absolutely like just fell in love with the smell of the studio. I fell in love with the materials. So materials have always been really important to me. I also set foot in the printmaking lab, and I took like a ton of printmaking. Holly was my undergrad printmaking professor, who's now in Dothan here. It's like serendipitously, right? We were reunited 20 plus years later, almost 25 years anyway. And so materials were important, process. That's why I fell in love with printmaking, because of that process, because of the materials. And I came out of undergrad making, you know, big manly sculptures, big metal fabrications. And I got to grad school, and I'm going to continue to be the best formalist fabricator ever. And I was, you know, challenged to not do that. It was like, oh, so you're going to just be like a really exceptional formalist? I was like, yeah. I was like, wait, was that a question? I don't know. I didn't, you know, and grad school is awesome. For those of you that are thinking about grad school, like, please do it. It's going to be like the time of your life. It's going to be so good. Anyhow, so in grad school, I'm introduced to fabric and materials. I had already, I'd done a little bit of performance art in undergrad. Remember the gold painted thing? Anyway, we can ask questions about that later. Well, yeah, we have, anyway. It was cold that day, I will say that. Anyway, and so I was already thinking about performance. I'm already thinking about materials. And in grad school, that begins to come back. Being exposed, you know, to Matthew Barney, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's like you can like do this. You can make like these like sculptures that are so bizarre and nobody understands them. And you can perform in them, and you can date Bjork, and it was just like, oh my goodness, it was all just,
anyone.
It was just like, oh my God. Only if you're Matthew Barney, you have to be like, it's like, who could date Bjork? Someone that's even more weird than Bjork could date Bjork and have a child or two. Anyway.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that's where sort of like this kind of story
I too was
up.
looking at Matthew Barney's work at that same time.
Yeah, that's right.
So
yeah,
we were not together yet, but
yeah, we've crossed paths at the Guggenheim when he had that big show.
Well, and I think
probably.
we figured out we were at the Venice Biennale the same summer also.
Yeah. Crossing paths, ships in the night, you know. Well, no, and it's funny because, you know, I went to grad school as she was going to grad school as well, but, you know, I was going to Massachusetts and she was coming to Texas. And anyhow, so our paths kept like crossing unbeknownst to us, obviously.
We even knew similar people.
We knew similar people,
or
yeah.
the same people.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went way off on tangent, so I'm going to stop and I'll let Bet take, reel us back in.
See if you can
One
make
of the
sense
things
that.
I can actually, like for me, one of the key ingredients that sort of makes this body of work and project possible is the sort of grounding and embodiment that you both have. There's a somatics and a physicality that you both bring to painting, sculpture, and your method of practice. So part of the context of this exhibition is a site-specific intervention that we made on Walnut Street here in Troy, where Caleb Dawson so generously let us take over 3 sites. We had started with 1, but ended up being these 3
Can we have one more?
you know, spaces that like where shop fronts used to be, and as part of like a historic downtown. And part of the thought process, to sort of tee up my question, was around sort of taking your practice as a set of processes and a methodology rather than solely outcomes and objects. To take that method and research process really and apply it to a new space, and a space really that still resonates with ideas around neglect and invisibility and visibility, but a vastly different landscape than sort of the Western desert. So my next question is, why don't you talk to us about how you've sort of taken that somatic grounding and applied it to a site-specific methodology? How do you respond to the ground underfoot? How do you create work as evidence of a relationship with place?
I'll tackle that one first.
Okay.
So
we're going to talk about dirt.
Yeah, we're going to talk about dirt. Dirt, lots of dirt. So the plan started off with sand. So you see the video in the back, and it's like, well, and it's not even sand. It's dirt. It's like the desert dirt, down in Big Bend, far west Texas. And so the plan was, like in my mind, it was always sand. We're going to bring sand, and then we started to think, well, that's going to look like a litter box, or the beach, and it wasn't quite what we were after.
Context is everything.
Context is absolutely everything. And so then I started looking at fill dirt, and I found this source for Alabama, like red Alabama fill dirt, which is beautiful, and it smells like so good. It stains everything also. And so that's kind of where that thinking began. Like I knew, like I had to have dirt, and I had to have tons of, like literally tons of dirt.
How many?
It was about 14 to 15 tons of dirt, 12 cubic yards, and anyway, it was literally tons of dirt. And I had to move it mostly by myself. I did have some help, but that's over 200 wheelbarrow loads of dirt. I didn't know that you could have blood blisters under calluses. That was like a new experience for me. But it was important. Part of this labor, part of the intensity of this being this sort of like anonymous figure that was in the streets of Troy shoveling dirt up until 1 a.m. with the one evening. We needed to like clear it out, and it was the cooler part of the
We were also
of the
concerned
week.
for rain coming.
Yes, there was.
It was the summer
It
in
rained
Alabama.
a lot here, so yeah, we were shoveling a little bit of mud at one point in
And
time.
initially, I wasn't going to help him
Right.
because conceptually it seemed that he wanted to do it, but then then I thought, well, I probably should help you, like
Right.
we're partners. And then when it was like the rain was coming, and then it was like, he really does
I
need my
need help.
now. But that was, I mean, for me, the color of the dirt was like magnificent. And if you think about, well, and then even if we back up, before we even brought the dirt in, we spent an amount of time pulling weeds and cleaning the space and getting to know it. So there was, and there had been a trip prior to that too, where we came and we were here in the spring and we traveled around and I photographing is part of my process. So there was, lots of photographing and looking at buildings and thinking about the history and getting to know people. And we were reading too. I mean, there was a lot. It wasn't like we just showed up. Like we were really being thoughtful and trying to understand. And so then when we came, I think the part of actually clearing that lot and weeding and getting, there were different things in that space that we moved to the other space, and then the dirt. So. And then, of course, we were dealing with the weather, and that's been part of what we would do in Texas. It's back to this, like, it's not easy. Like, we don't want it to be easy, or I don't want, we don't.
She doesn't want it to be easy.
My father is always
I'm like, can we,
questioning
like,
me. He's kind of funny.
take it
He's like, are you
easier?
intentionally trying to make everything as difficult as possible?
Says the man that needed to shovel his own dirt.
I know.
Yeah.
But it's my idea.
Yeah. So I mean, I felt like we were really getting to know the space. I mean, we were there through all times of the day. We were there through various weather, late at night, you know, seeing the businesses and the traffic come and go, and what it was like on Sunday when, you know, church was getting out versus what it's like in the morning. So, you know, that was all really beautiful, and I think important, seeing the shadows that were cast, and, you know, so that was a huge part of it before, you know, just in that preparation stage.
Yeah, the process, the thinking, the planning. I mean, yeah,
What were those buildings before we were
Right.
there, and hearing, you know, stories that way too.
And as a sculptor, you know, you have to like think about process and materials, and you know, you don't want to waste materials because, you know, materials are expensive, which gets us. Well, that's further down. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. So what ended up being created are these documents, really. Like, they're paintings and they're sculptures, but they are also documents of an experience. We've got the 63-foot painting that you cannot, the only way to see the entire thing is through like an aerial drone shot over the space. And these sculptures that were performance objects that were really for mark making into the landscape. And so what does it mean to your work, sort of moving between site and process, and, you know, what is the conversation that you're hoping that these documents of a set of experiences, of a performance of identity, and all that shoveling and labor, what does it mean to bring that into this sort of space, and what kind of conversation are you hoping that it facilitates?
Neither of us wants to go first.
You go first. That's okay.
Well, okay, I'm going to answer in a more formal way first.
Okay.
So when we were out in the, you know, out in the land in the desert, we were thinking about how, you know, making a mark upon that land. And we're thinking, as Angel's been thinking about marks and erasure and, you know, the evidence, and we're also usually thinking about, well, how can we make marks on the land that we're not destroying the land either? So there have been, and I think they're in some of the videos, performances that we've done with cloth and fabric on the land. You know, like, you can't make a paint mark, but you could take a big piece of red canvas and move that across the land. So those are things we'd been investigating out there. So when we got here, and Angel had more of a plan than I did. You know, and I was part of that plan, but that was, you know, we were going to do the dirt room. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Like, I knew I wanted to make paintings. And I initially was thinking that I was going to impose like shaped paintings and make a series and put them on the land. And, you know, it was really exciting to be here and see what it was like. It was really different from the desert, where there was this total openness. There's like no telephone poles. There's like nothing, versus here having the walls of the building. And so I was about to start cutting the canvas and thinking about shapes, kind of like cloud, not clouds. But then we'd already been viewing the buildings from above, aerial views, and I thought, oh, if I could just make this big long mark, roll out the canvas the whole way, how that would look in the building, you know, and in regard to that like long rectangle. And I was thinking about how that was going to look juxtaposed to the dirt. And then we already had our eyes on that third bay, which was green grass. So at that point, like, I was already thinking about this kind of triptych idea of the different, you know, sections, and, you know, responding to the architecture, you know, and also thinking about how the sky looked in relation, you know, to the architecture. So that all started to be, you know, really exciting. And of course the graffiti was a huge, I didn't even say that, but the room that I had was, you know, pretty filled with color and evidence of drawings and graffiti and layering. So it had this really different vibe than, you know, Angel's space. So I felt like, oh, the painting needs to communicate with those marks of the people who had made work on the walls. So that really kind of set a tone as well. And I think I started the painting by actually tracing the shadow that was cast, from the building on it. So, I think that once again, that observation and time was really important. Like, I think that the dirt shoveling experience, although we were exhausted when it was over, was so key to just getting to exist in the space and start making all those observations before I got started, and trying to bring what we were doing in the desert, but of course here with these different different structures, more people. There were people around. That was also really different. Like, we're isolated out there, and we kept like stopping and talking to people, and people were asking what we were up to, and so there was more of exchange going on that way. I don't know that I answered your question though. Maybe
I think you did.
Kind of.
Yeah, sort of. When we're out in our place out in Texas in the desert, we're like 5 miles away from the last paved road. There's no water, there's zero utility, so it's completely off grid. And so it's this place of we're really aware of everything, how much water we have. What's the weather going to do? Because if it rains, we're stuck, right? And we have children. We have 6 kids, by the way. I don't know if anyone mentioned that. We have a bunch of kids. Which makes everything even more burdensome, right? And so when we're out in the desert, we go and we exist in that space. I mean, obviously we're existing in it because we're there, but we're very intentional about the way that we exist in that space. We bring some kids toys and entertainment, but when the iPad dies, like, that's it. You got to find something else to do. So we've done things like digging holes. I know it's like, oh, there's movies about that actually. And as a kid growing up in Mexico, we would dig holes all the time because it was like something like, let's see how big of a hole we can make.
Right.
And we do that in the desert with them. And
they put their little brother in it.
Yeah, they'll stick their brother in it, and they call it the A hole and the B hole and the C. Just they designate them. I know. Yeah. But yeah. And so we're interacting, with the space, with the land, with the earth. We're like wearing this earth. We're inhaling this earth. It's becoming, like physically a part of us, psychologically, as well. My practice is while I'm a sculptor and I have performative aspects to my work. I teach a ton of drawing. Like that's how I pay for this bad art habit that I have, is that I teach 2 sections per semester of drawing, a section of design. I have an art of preach class as well because I have 6 kids and they need braces. And so we think of this as drawing. It is mark making, and that's what we brought to Alabama as well. But we couldn't, it's like...
Yeah, because we think of that we had started thinking of our studio, we call it our studio out there, as, like a raw canvas that we can work upon. And that's kind of been our just goal direction. So in that way, when we came out here, it was like, how can we make, and again, the triptych was like so thrilling. How can it got bigger, and we started to think about how to compose, in this landscape. Yeah.
And like we're doing now, we were like visually talking over each other, right? We had the earth, and then the goal was initially to paint on the walls, but it was like, well, that's kind of distracting, from the red earth. And so, Winter essentially like removed herself from my space. I was like, well, there's 3 buildings. Like, I'll take this space. You can have the next space over. And then there was still a 3rd space that we used. But at the, just as in the same way that we work in our studio in Fort Worth, in our studio out in the desert in Big Bend, it's always like this constant sort of exchange. It's like, well, what are you working on? What are you doing? Or she'll call me over, well, what do you think about this? and I'll say stupid things like, well, I don't know, those marks are kind of cowardly. Like, I don't know. Which, yeah, I only did that one time though, okay? I did that once. You learned, I learned, not to say that again. So I rephrased the way I say
did
things.
adjust, and it turned out well.
It's a beautiful painting. Yeah, a non-coward, a very brave painting now.
Very good.
But anyway, it's.
Well, so I think we were having a conversation, with each other, but with the land, with the community.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring like desert. I wanted to like. I'm so glad we didn't do that. I wanted to bring earth from our property. So we have 40 acres of dirt. So we got plenty of dirt out in Texas. But thank you for talking me down from that. But it was like, well, we could just get you some dirt here. There's probably like creatures living in that dirt anyway that we don't want in our space. I was like, oh yeah. It's like, and that's, you need that I think in your practice, someone that can like ground you a little bit, right? Because we have these like magnificent ideas of these great big things that you want to do. And then it's like, okay, well, how do I do it? How do I figure that out? Who's going to pay for it? And these are all, true concerns, legitimate concerns. So
yeah, I think one of the things that it's the reason to sort of support these projects and support continued work is, and you guys are a perfect example of the way that artists help us imagine new possibilities in space by virtue of you going in and being willing to listen and adapt and create without a fixed destination. We came into the project, and I think I told you 2 years ago, like, we're not the kind of space that's going to have like your proposal 2 years from now going, the measurements are off. You told me this would be 18 inches. We tried to create an exhibition-making environment and a project support system that allowed for adaptation and allowed for change, knowing that the best work comes from listening, from sort of a call and response and participating in the world and not just willing what you can imagine on it, but allowing the world to sort of tell you what it needs. So that tees up my next question is, do you think Alabama's changed you or your practice? When you leave here, what will you carry with you about this place?
Oh, I mean, I think absolutely. I don't know, I'm getting like weepy. No, I mean, it was, it was just remarkable to, besides just all the support, but to feel like a place was willing to let us come here and make work, and and then even stretching and working in a totally different way. I mean, I commented about people being around, but so that was like a little, I mean, not totally alarming, but that I was making this like giant thing that I didn't really know what it was going to be out in front of everybody. Like, it wasn't just in the privacy of a remote location where if I made like something super horrible, nobody would have to see it. So there was I felt pretty vulnerable right out there doing that, and knew that people were driving by and slowing down and looking, and but I felt like I discovered so much in the simple things like, oh, well, why don't I, run the canvas over this hill and this thing is in my way. Well, that's okay. I'll just use that, and grass and concrete. And I mean, I did stuff that I never thought I would do, because immediately I was like, well, I can't do that because, and I thought, well, but maybe I can. So I think, my practice was really challenged, but then also I was so rewarded by the humanity of the entire project, and investing in just a different location. And of course I feel like we've only scratched the surface, but thinking about the history of Alabama and similarities between things we're seeing in Texas, and of course from Pennsylvania, like there's so many connections between all of humanity in the way we migrate, the way we journey, how you come to be in a place that you maybe didn't expect to be in, what's the history of that place. So I feel like I've grown, so much, and it definitely has made an enormous impact on me and what I think can be possible.
I'll never look at red dirt the same, that's for sure. Just when I think I'm like done shoveling dirt, we're like, oh, we need more dirt for the box. Go get some more dirt. But
6 more buckets.
6 more buckets, 8 more buckets.
And that's so true though. I mean, I feel like, whoa, I really, like as a painter and thinking about pigment, like getting to deal with that much soil and dirt and even just, I know I cut you off, but
That's okay.
we were
I'm
there
used to
and
it.
watching the color change, watching the color of the dirt change and as it's wet, as it's dry,
Right.
all those things. Okay, I'll stop.
No, you keep going. No, but there's, I mean, it's like we really like Alabama a lot. I think we just like any place that we go a lot, honestly, only because we went to Montana and we were like, oh man, how do we get a place up here by Glacier? Because if you haven't been to Glacier, oh my God, it's beautiful. And then we learned that they get up to 400 inches of snow in one winter. Like maybe it's not that cool. Or I like shoveling. You know what? But I don't like shoveling snow. Like, oh, I hate shoveling. snow.
Ironically, I'm winter and I don't like snow.
but the landscape here is just beautiful, and I mean, even though I have this love-hate relationship with your dirt here, it's really it's loaded and packed with lots of histories.
Well, and there's such a, I mean, we were down in Mobile in that area too, in the coastal area. So,
Right.
I mean, I fell in love with that as well.
Yeah.
So,
So we love the landscape, and so, I was sort of half jokingly with Sarah. I was like, well, we got to find a way to get a place out here, because that's like if the teaching thing doesn't work out, we'll be like land barons, or not really. We'll get a patch of dirt in Alabama, but it goes back to drawing. I think it's about how do you like leave a mark in a place, and that place marks you as well. And I think that's been something really quite beautiful here.
yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, I've always longed to kind of keep going and see different things. And even though we've sort of centered ourselves like with this dedication and investment to the Southwest, in that not only did we buy the 40 plus acres that's very off-grid, we bought like a backup smaller property out there as well, so that if we get out there and we can't get to one, we go to the other. But I think a similar thought is to kind of keep having comparisons and traveling, a variety of places, seeing how does that, what is it like in, Montana versus what is it in Alabama, and having this conversation with the landscapes, not just.
We've both decided we're going to go die on our property someday. When we're ready. I'm gonna dig a hole. I'm gonna dig a hole for myself. So my kids don't have to do it. I want to go straight in. She doesn't want me to get cremated. I know. I'm just like, I want to be cremated. I want to be thrown in a hole and covered up, and I want to be forgotten, in that land, in that space. She's like, you can't get cremated. Like, well, that's what that's what I want. And anyhow, but that's just, that's just like I want to be a part of that landscape.
Yeah.
And I feel like really strong. Like I'm gonna cry. I cry a lot. But that's like when we got to Big Bend, and I'm like crying now. We got to Big Bend, right? And I've been in Texas for 30 years before my first time to going out there, to visiting that space. And we go out there, and it felt like Alabama weather, because it was like raining, right, in the desert. And it's raining, and we see Santiago Peak, which is I'll always remember seeing Santiago Peak, just this flat top. And we both start crying, and we're like, why are we crying? Like, because it was just like so beautiful. And like we feel so strongly about that place, I think. I don't even know why I'm crying. Like, it's just, it's like, it's here, you know, it's always going to be there, so. And so now there's a little place for Alabama right in there too, with its red dirt and stuff. So, anyway.
So do we have time to open it up for questions from the audience? Do you guys have any questions
I don't know
for
why I'm
us?
crying.
Give us a minute to
Usually I
pull
cry.
ourselves together.
Sorry.
Hey.
Hi. I have a question to tag on to exactly what you were talking about, though.
Sure.
It's metaphysical.
Yeah.
My question is...
Don't make me cry. Don't make me cry. Come on. I'm sorry.
Your connection to the land and the physicality of it. I'm trying to reach for a metaphysical connection beyond our physical selves, where when we experience art, like the whole time I'm looking at this, synopses are going off. Like, what
Yeah.
can I tell Mary about her paintings right after this? And my question is about us not being in our physical bodies, but how we as artists can extend beyond our physical bodies and create these metaphysical experiences. And I put betters right there. Asking you to figure out what I just said, because you want to be cremated, you want to be in the hole, you want to be part of the dirt. The bigger question is, why do you feel that way on a molecular, spiritual, abstract, metaphysical kind of way?
The real
Isn't that what we
so
do as
so
artists?
all right. You want the honest answer?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why I have that connection. Like I just I don't.
But you feel it on energy.
Oh,
like the
yeah.
way I was
Yeah.
explaining
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and to maybe give you some space, I can redirect that question to Winter
Yes, please.
and maybe talk about dreams, like talk about the shaped work and because I think this is also part of the connective tissue between your two practices.
Yeah, I mean, I had really, vivid dreams about being in like I was interlingua. That's like the town, city that's closest to where our land is. And, the mountains were like becoming waves, like the mountains were waves. And I was in this like vast space. And it was very sublime. Like I was terrified in the dream, but yet I wasn't, I liked being there, and it was so beautiful. And, so we go out there and, oh no, now I'm gonna cry. No, no, but there's,
Texas
it's just,
babies just weeping.
No, it's just so it's so magnificent, and I mean, I think in some ways it goes back for me to something like the river, right? Like I really wanted to go down the river. I liked the sense of. Like you couldn't think about anything other than really like where you were and you're navigating the water. It was always changing. You couldn't predict it. The light changed while you were on it. You're like out of control. Like you're doing your best to get through that. And I remember being really terrified, like I was responsible for people's lives, as well. So there was this certain perceptual like change that would happen and such focus on that, which I still think about how much I got out of we did the seasons, we did icebreakers when it was like you could die of, hypothermia in the water to like, the really beautiful falls, the fall colors. But anyhow, it's to me that like connects with, whether it was Glacier where we were trying to figure out which trails can we go on with the kids and not put ourselves in, too much danger. You don't want that.
They have grizzly
It's like a
bears.
certain, awareness in, again, I keep using the word sublime of how small you are in this vast space, and thinking about how I know humans have felt like that forever. Like, looking at the sky, looking at the water, looking at these spaces. Like I think it's a connection through humanity. And then even thinking about, the journey and the travel, whether it's like the hike where you're going somewhere or, people migrating from one country to, another land and what you're dealing with. So, when I'm painting, I'm on one hand aware of where I am in that moment, but memory and a stacking of memories of all those experiences, I think, are always playing into the paintings. I've always said that I don't feel like I make a series and I'm like, okay, that series is done and now I'm on to the next series. It's like every painting I make is building on all of those, you know, like I still think of a moment we had in Niagara Falls where it was like they were shooting off the first fireworks of the season and it was kind of raining and there was like these green, yellow artificial lights like in the mist. It was very Turner-esque, you know, and I will never, like I feel like it's in all the paintings, you know, those moments. So everything just keeps stacking. And the experience is just the same way that, you know, what I went through here in Alabama, because, you know, I loved it, but it was hard. Like it was hard, it was hot, it was wet, you know, but it was beautiful. You know, we were there in lightning, like the kids were scared. I feel like we're always making the kids scared, you know, doing things like that, but not too scared. They're safe. But,
Yeah. We survive thunderstorms like every day.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
There was one occasion where we have gotten stuck on our property a few times, and it's okay. But they prefer comfort a little more. But
Yeah.
Anybody else got? Yeah, Johnny, hit me.
Hey, thank you guys so much for being here. It's just been a pleasure to get to know you, and I love this work, and I can't wait to spend more time in it for myself, but also with my students, so thank you. That's the first thing I want to say. Second, this may be more of a comment than a question, but when you were talking about, I didn't know this whitewater rafting thing, right? Like, and I just think about bodies of water and rivers in particular, which is such an important part of like what you were talking about, Big Bend, right? Like, and that sort of traversal of that space, like often rivers demarcate borders, right? So you were saying like, oh, I don't know, you know, I'm here from Pennsylvania, I don't know about this, but I feel like you have all, like from what you've been saying, I feel like all of those connections are really there, and I thought that was, I just want to kind of bring that up and sort of.
Right, and we have, you know, to jump in, we have, we've spent, you know, chapters of time studying, you know, the Rio Grande. Like there was one whole summer we spent, you know, kind of driving it. In between doing the national park and the state park, and you know, going and photographing the Rio Grande. And then there was another whole body of work that was kind of based on the water holes. We ended up finding that, but it took years. It took years of us having the land out there for finally some neighbors to be like, hey, there's a water hole over here, we'll show you. And we had heard that it was there, but it took like years before people would like show us and trust us to show us. And then we spent time photographing that with the drone and watching it change, watching the color change, like depending on, you know, how much rainfall and what the edges look like. And so it's been interesting that I feel like I started looking out, you know, at the landscape and the shapes, but then in the end there's been so much like looking down and understanding the pathways that the water takes and the traces that it makes. And then we have wild donkeys out there and seeing their, you know, their hoof prints and then watching the water holes. And so I think it very much connects, back with that beginning. And then for me, you know, the movement upon the land and us walking, like I went from, you know, I started my dance time period and very much in like entertainment, you know, kind of dancing. But by the time I ended, I was more interested in choreography and like pedestrian movements. And then I needed like a break from it. I always joked that, you know, I like that I can get my Prussian blue and burnt sienna out at any time of day and they don't argue with each other and I don't have to worry about schedules, you know. But it's been nice that it's like kind of come full circle to thinking about us in the land and us here in Alabama and kind of choreographing that movement in the spaces while we're making this like site-specific piece that then, you know, we can try to talk about in here and share, right, as a recording of what happened. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah? Well, now you have to ask a question.
I don't necessarily have a question. I was fighting with a couple of people online, before I got here, and I was kind of pissed off because, curriculum's not, online, it's not looking like what's on the catalog, and I'm pissed off because somebody's not doing their job, and it's not me, it's somebody else, which is good because it's usually until one points to me. But so it's kind of, and so I really wanted to come and be here, and I walked in the door, and it's the first time I saw the work. It just emotionally, it was just so beautiful. Just to say that. And I wanted to tell you that my grandfather was a farmer in Western Oklahoma. He had a farm in, I don't even know if it's a town called Quail, Texas, out in the Texas Panhandle. And so he bought land in Oklahoma, and he was actually named Farmer of the Year in 1947 for terrace farming. He developed a way to save the soil from the wind.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Terrace farming. But when he retired, they moved to Mangum, Oklahoma, which has red dirt, and they also make bricks. So I have a few Mangum stamped bricks in my house. So when I moved to Alabama, I was like, why the hell would anybody want to move to Alabama? But it was the red dirt that there was a connection to, and I've got a big pile in my yard that
Need someone to move it?
yeah. I've had it there about 2 years. It winds up in my garden. But I really just appreciate y'all being here. It truly has been very magical for, I think, our faculty, definitely our students.
And for us as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because
Well,
art is magical.
I will
It
close.
should be.
I will
Yeah.
close by expressing my undying love and gratitude for Troy University for hosting us, for the Department of Art and Design, the International Arts Center. There is an entire support system around this project that made it possible. Alabama State Council on the Arts, the Tigro Foundation, the Andy Warhol Foundation for Visual Art, the Daniel Foundation, Roscoe Jackson, everybody rallied around this and made it possible, and these things mean something indelible and add to the wealth and vitality of our community substantially, and I'm so grateful for all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.